Politician Tiffany Henyard appears to have lost control of both governments. Now she's teasing a big announcement she claims will result in some of her opponents being...
You might not be familiar with Tiffany Henyard, the self-proclaimed super mayor of Dolton, Illinois, but by the end of this, you'll be captivated. If you think you've seen political scandals before, brace yourself. This one is so tangled in controversy that it might seem fictional, but it's very much real. Picture this. A mayor being forced out of her own home while under investigation by the FBI for corruption, and as if that was enough, the FBI is reportedly using her to detain political rivals. Oh, and did we mention she's still running for re-election? Mayor Tiffany Henyard of Dolton, Illinois, has recently come under intense scrutiny after revelations about her personal and financial behavior stirred significant controversy. Henyard, who earns substantial income from her dual roles as township supervisor and mayor, is currently living in a rental property owned by Janetta Hall. What started as a friendly arrangement between the two women has quickly spiraled into a dramatic and unsettling situation. Hall claims their relationship soured when Henyard allegedly bypassed a prior agreement that would have allowed another tenant to move into the property, and in its place, Hall was persuaded to let Henyard rent the space starting in August. However, despite her high-paying public positions, Henyard and her boyfriend, Kim Woods, have failed to pay any rent, placing a heavy financial burden on Hall, who is now dealing with thousands of dollars in unpaid rent. Hall, having once viewed Henyard as a friend, is understandably upset, especially given the stark contrast between Henyard's financial situation and her failure to meet basic rental obligations. This situation has caught the public's attention, particularly because Henyard holds significant public trust in her leadership roles. Concerns have arisen about her ability to fulfill such responsibilities when she cannot even meet the demands of a simple rental contract. As the months passed with no rent paid, Hall initiated an eviction process in an attempt to reclaim her property and recover the unpaid rent. Despite the legal action, Henyard has continued to perform her public duties with a sense of defiance, seemingly unfazed by the growing controversy surrounding her financial behavior. Her failure to pay rent has added to a mounting list of scandals that have plagued her tenure as mayor. Detractors argue that the situation is emblematic of a larger issue. How can a person entrusted with managing public resources, both as a township supervisor and mayor, exhibit such a glaring lack of accountability in her personal life? The hypocrisy of someone in such a position of authority failing to fulfill basic financial obligations has raised further concerns among residents. Henyard's actions seem to reflect a troubling disconnect between her professional responsibilities and personal behavior. The public's reaction has been one of confusion and frustration, especially given the increasing number of controversies surrounding her leadership. What started as a private dispute over unpaid rent has now become a reflection of Henyard's leadership style and character. The discrepancy between her high-paying government roles and failure to live up to basic financial responsibilities has fueled criticism, calling into question her suitability for continued leadership in Dolton. As the story continues to unfold, the debate over her leadership and ability to govern effectively in light of her personal failures only grows louder. The situation has escalated into an ongoing legal and ethical crisis for Henyard, complicating her position as both a public official and a member of the local community. What began as a personal financial issue between Henyard and Hall has now become a public spectacle, raising significant concerns about Henyard's leadership abilities. The dispute between them has revealed a side of Henyard that many did not expect, as what was once a friendly relationship between the two women has soured in a way that reflects a deep divide between Henyard and many of Dolton's residents. Henyard's actions have raised serious questions about her ability to manage public resources and fulfill her obligations as a public servant. By preventing Hall from accessing the property, allegedly changing the locks and garage codes to block property inspections, Henyard appears to be disregarding both her legal and financial obligations as well as the trust placed in her by the public. Hall, who once considered Henyard a friend, now finds herself grappling with the humiliation of being barred from her own property by a sitting mayor, someone who is supposed to be an example of transparency, responsibility, and respect for the rule of law. This dispute has added to a growing list of scandals and controversies surrounding Henyard's tenure as mayor, casting a dark shadow over her leadership and raising doubts about her suitability for continued public service. The situation is further complicated by Henyard's ongoing resistance to the eviction process, which has left Hall, the local sheriff's office, and the community in a state of uncertainty. Henyard's actions are seen by many as a flagrant abuse of power as she continues to ignore her financial and legal responsibilities while occupying a position of authority for residents of Dolton. This is no longer just a landlord-tenant issue. It has become a symbol of the wider concern surrounding Henyard's leadership, Her failure to fulfill basic financial obligations, combined with her apparent disregard for legal processes she is supposed to respect, has created a sense of mistrust and disillusionment among the people who once supported her. The frustration and confusion are mounting, as residents question whether a leader who refuses to adhere to the very laws she is supposed to enforce is fit to lead the community. In a recent township meeting, Hall publicly spoke out about her struggles to get Henyard to meet her rental obligations, further adding to the drama surrounding Henyard's public image. Hall explained that despite Henyard's significant income, reportedly over $300,000 a year, she and her partner, Kim Woods, had refused to pay even a modest rent increase of $200. Hall, who once considered Henyard a trusted figure in the community, was left frustrated and bewildered by their refusal to meet such a minor financial request, especially given their high earnings. The situation has drawn widespread attention, and many residents are questioning how such an issue could arise when the couple clearly has the financial resources to cover the increase. Hall now faces the humiliation and stress of dealing with a non-paying tenant, who happens to be the sitting mayor, someone who is supposed to set an example of fiscal responsibility. Instead, Henyard's actions have led to a serious disconnect between her personal financial management and her public persona. This growing controversy has only deepened as Hall attempts to navigate the legal process. Henyard's reluctance to comply with the eviction proceedings has turned what could have been a straightforward matter into a complex and highly publicized issue. Hall's frustrations are shared by many residents of Dolton, who have expressed disbelief that a public official earning such a substantial salary will be unable to fulfill basic financial obligations. The failure to meet such responsibilities, critics argue, undermines the very foundation of Henyard's authority. As this situation continues to unfold, Henyard's political career is increasingly under fire. With public opinion turning against her, questions arise about how she can possibly hope to win a second term as mayor. Despite the mounting legal troubles, public outcry, and her growing list of scandals, Henyard remains determined to run for re-election. In a move that can only be described as politically defiant, she is continuing her campaign for a second term even as she faces increasing pressure from both her political opponents and the public. The irony here is palpable. Henyard's claim of being a leader dedicated to the people of Dolton seems at odds with her actions, which suggests that her priorities lie elsewhere. Whether it's refusing to pay rent, evading legal proceedings, or using public funds for personal gain, her actions have left residents questioning her fitness to serve. The longer Henyard holds onto power, the more doubts are cast over her ability to lead effectively. As the clock ticks down toward the next election, the pressure is mounting for both Henyard and the residents of Dolton, who must decide whether they can continue to tolerate a leader whose actions seem to subvert the very principles she was elected to uphold in the end. Henyard's tenure as mayor may well hinge on the public's willingness to demand accountability. Whether or not she will be held accountable for her actions remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The growing legal issues, personal scandals, and public discontent have eroded the trust of those around her. As the eviction saga continues and calls for accountability grow louder, Dolton's residents must grapple with the reality of whether they can continue to tolerate a mayor whose actions increasingly appear to contradict the values she once promised to uphold. The political landscape in Dolton is now at tipping point. Will Henyard survive this scandal, or will the mounting pressure finally push her from office? As the situation continues to unfold, one thing remains certain. Dolton's future is at stake. The legal situation surrounding Mayor Tiffany Henyard Dolton, Illinois, has escalated to a point where her landlord, Janetta Hall, has been forced to hire a process server to deliver court documents. Henyard and her partner, Kim Woods, have allegedly been evading legal proceedings, including eviction notices. What began as a simple financial dispute has now turned into a public spectacle, with the entire community watching in disbelief and frustration. For a mayor, especially one with substantial financial resources, to ignore basic responsibilities like paying rent is a troubling act of negligence that has severely damaged her reputation and raised serious concerns about her leadership. This dispute, once a minor financial disagreement, has now come to symbolize a broader issue of public trust. Henyard's actions have betrayed the values Dolton residents expect from their leaders. Both she and Woods, who enjoy comfortable incomes, have refused to address even a modest rent increase, something that many residents find baffling. The fact that Henyard has allowed this issue to spiral out of control, causing significant stress for her landlord, who must now resort to extreme legal action to recover unpaid rent, speaks volumes about her disregard for accountability. Hall, who once considered Henyard a friend and ally, now finds herself in an incredibly difficult position. Having pursued legal action against someone she once trusted only compounds the emotional and financial strain of the situation. Hall's frustration is entirely understandable. How could someone in Henyard's financial position let a situation like this escalate? This question is now being asked by many residents of Dolton, as Henyard's refusal to pay a modest rent increase is just the latest in a series of actions that have undermined her credibility and leadership once celebrated as a trailblazer and an advocate for change. Henyard's actions are now casting doubt on her ability to lead with integrity. As residents' trust in her leadership continues to erode, the rent dispute has become emblematic of a much larger issue: accountability. Henyard's refusal to meet basic legal and financial obligations, coupled with her resistance to legal processes, has amplified concerns about her suitability for public office. The question now is whether this financial disregard and defiance will be the final straw that forces the people of Dolton to demand a change in leadership as the situation spirals further out of control. The community's growing frustration is palpable. What began as a small issue has ballooned into a controversy that has put Henyard's leadership under the microscope. For a public official with a secure financial position to continue evading responsibility while her town faces significant financial struggles has raised alarms. Henyard's actions, or lack thereof, are causing many to question whether Dolton can survive under her leadership and whether she is fit to continue serving the community that she was elected to lead. The financial mismanagement under Henyard's leadership is also becoming increasingly apparent. The town of Dolton is facing dire financial struggles, with a reported deficit of over $365 million. A recent investigation by former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot revealed alarming misuse of taxpayer funds. Among the most egregious findings was that a significant portion of Dolton's dwindling resources had been spent on purchases from major companies like Amazon, Wayfair, and Walgreens. For instance, Henyard made a jaw-dropping $40,000 purchase from Amazon in early 2023 and continued her spending spree with nearly $7,500 on Wayfair in September 2023. These expenses, combined with other questionable financial decisions, have fueled growing concerns about her spending habits, adding fuel to the fire. It was discovered that the village had issued over $6 million in checks to vendors that were printed but never sent, leaving businesses and suppliers unpaid and in financial limbo. Meanwhile, Dolton's police officers have been receiving overtime pay that exceeds their base salaries, with one officer reportedly earning nearly $102,000 in overtime alone, on top of a base wage of $73,500. This reckless spending, paired with severe lack of accountability, has left Dolton's finances in ruins, and the people of the town are growing increasingly frustrated with Henyard's leadership. What is even more troubling is Henyard's apparent indifference to the crisis. During a particularly heated public meeting, when trustees questioned her financial decisions and refused to approve expenses without proper documentation, Henyard snapped, saying, "You all forget I'm the leader." This outburst was just the latest in a long string of conflicts between Henyard and the trustees, who have repeatedly expressed distrust in her leadership. Trustees Jason House and Brittany Norwood, two vocal critics, have slammed Henyard for the village's lack of financial transparency and accused her of mismanaging taxpayer dollars to the point that vendors have gone unpaid and meetings cannot proceed due to a lack of quorum. Henyard's refusal to acknowledge the concerns of the trustees has only deepened the animosity between them and the mayor, making it clear that this conflict is far from resolved. In a now infamous 90-minute Facebook Live video, Henyard addressed her critics in a fiery tirade, accusing them of engaging in a power and money grab and threatening to have her opponents arrested, though she did not specify the charges. Her comments served only to fuel the flames of discontent, as she maintained that she was a victim of a smear campaign, despite mounting evidence of corruption and poor financial management under her leadership. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of this entire situation is Henyard's continued campaign for re-election. Despite the mounting evidence of financial mismanagement, corruption, and a growing public outcry, Henyard remains determined to run for another term in office. This defiance in the face of overwhelming criticism is not only puzzling, but also reveals her disregard for the growing discontent among the people she is supposed to serve. The idea that she is seeking re-election after so many accusations of financial mismanagement and corruption is a testament to her resilience, but also her apparent indifference to the consequences of her actions for many residents of Dolton. The situation has become a dramatic spectacle. Henyard's extravagant spending, combined with her open hostility toward those who challenge her decisions, has deepened the divide between her and the people she is supposed to represent. It is an almost unfathomable situation. A mayor whose town is on the brink of financial collapse continues to evade accountability while living a life of luxury. Her ongoing fight to maintain power, despite the mounting evidence against her, has left the community divided. With many questioning whether Dolton can survive under her leadership, the political drama in Dolton is now a reflection of broader issues of financial mismanagement, corruption, and a lack of leadership accountability. The town's residents are left to wonder how much longer they can tolerate this toxic environment before demanding change. As Henyard clings desperately to power, the situation is increasingly becoming a test of whether Dolton can reclaim its future, or whether this marks the beginning of an even darker chapter in the town's political history. The political landscape in Dolton is now at a tipping point. Will Henyard's continued defiance and resistance to accountability finally lead to her downfall, or will she manage to hold on to power despite the overwhelming evidence against her? One thing is clear. The situation is becoming untenable, and the community is left grappling with the question of whether they can afford to wait for change, or whether they must act now to protect their future.
Because I'm at wit's end, and I fear that I'm going to go into foreclosure if I can't.
Despite being under FBI investigation, facing eviction, and embroiled in a public feud with her own trustees, Mayor Tiffany Henyard of Dolton, Illinois, remains determined to run for re-election, convinced she will secure overwhelming support. Her unwavering confidence in winning another term, however, is puzzling given her history of scandals and mismanagement. After months of dodging rent payments, her landlord, Janetta Hall, reportedly visited Henyard personally, accusing the mayor of avoiding both her and the rent. Yet the broader question lingers. How can someone embroiled in so many scandals expect to rally enough support for re-election? According to trustee Chad Beller, who is part of a group opposing Henyard, the community no longer wants to be led by her. Beller argued that Henyard has wreaked devastation on the village, and the people are ready for change. The irony is stark. Despite Henyard's claims of fighting for people, her actions paint a very different picture. She has used village funds to throw extravagant parties, including one where R&B singer Keisha Cole and rapper Jay Holiday performed. This has sparked intense criticism from the community, with residents arguing that, instead of addressing Dolton's pressing needs, Henyard is more focused on her own image and comfort, adding insult to injury. Henyard has employed local police officers as her personal bodyguards. Some officers have been pulled from their regular duties and are reportedly working overtime, sometimes over 100 hours per paycheck, to escort her around town. This practice has drawn further frustration, with trustee Brittany Norwood criticizing it at a public hearing. She argued that, while police officers are indeed working, they should be defending the community rather than serving as Henyard's personal security detail. The picture of Dolton under Henyard's leadership is grim. Reckless spending has left the town's finances in ruins, and Henyard behavior has caused division and frustration among residents. It's not just Dolton that's suffering. Henyard also manages Thorn Township, where she serves as supervisor. Here, too, residents are growing increasingly irate over her handling of their concerns. Despite the mounting discontent, Henyard remains defiant, insisting that she's being wronged and that everything she does is for the good community. Meanwhile, town records reveal that Henyard and her associates have spent over $67,000 on extravagant vacations to places like Portland, Austin, Atlanta, and New York City. These trips were often in first class and stayed at luxury hotels like the Four Seasons. In New York alone, Henyard's group racked up a staggering $113,000 bill at the Marriott in Times Square. Such lavish spending raises serious questions about her priorities and the justification for using public funds to indulge in luxury travel. When the town is in financial distress to some, Henyard seems more like a reality TV star than a public servant, constantly performing for the cameras while living a life of luxury, all while the people of Dolton continue to struggle. Adding to the growing concerns, the sheriff has had to visit her property multiple times to serve legal notices, which is especially troubling considering her significant salary, over $350,000 a year. As mayor, her grip on power, including control over the police force, has led some frustrated citizens to compare her to South American dictators, suggesting she's turned Dolton into her personal fiefdom. Accusations of abuse of power are mounting, with critics alleging that Henyard is more focused on promoting herself than fulfilling her duties as a public servant. The situation in Dolton has reached a breaking point, with mounting discontent and calls for change. Yet despite all the scandals, mismanagement, and accusations, Henyard remains steadfast in her re-election campaign, showing no signs of backing down her insistence on running for a second term. In the face of overwhelming public dissatisfaction and mounting legal and financial troubles, only fuels further resentment among Dolton's residents. The question now is whether the people of Dolton will finally demand accountability and change, or whether Henyard will continue to hold power, using it to further her own interests while the village continues to suffer under her leadership as the community grapples with the fallout from Henyard's actions. It remains to be seen whether this will be the final chapter in her tumultuous political career, or she will somehow manage to turn the tide and secure another term in office. The stakes have never been higher for Dolton, and the road ahead is uncertain.